Take Back Your Health Now, Episode 39.
You're listening to the Take Back Your Health Now podcast, the show that interviews the top doctors, athletes, trainers, and entrepreneurs to help you find the holy grail of health. Now here's your host, Dr. Dan Margolin.
Hi, it's Dr. Dan Margolin with another segment of Take Back Your Health Now, where we pull out all the stops in search of health's holy grail. Today we are excited to have Mr. Tony Mitra. He's a photographer, birdwatcher, blogger, and food security activist. Tony has been around Canada with scientists talking about glyphosate, which is the Roundup herbicide, in food and the dangers therein. He cajoled and nudged the Canadian government 3 years ago to set up labs so that foods could be tested for glyphosate concentration. By 2015, the labs came out and the government started testing foods for glyphosate. By the end of 2016, he became the only person to have nearly 8,000 records of foods tested by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for the presence of glyphosate, covering foods from over 60 countries. Wow, amazing. Tony, how are you, sir? Welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. Tony, let's just sort of jump in. So how did you get involved in going after the Canadian government and getting them to test foods? How did that go about? How did that start?
Well, I used to live in USA before I came to Canada in 2002, and I was already of a social bent to look after, to be conscious about changes happening in the society that may look like progress on one end, but maybe actually the opposite of that for the health of the environment and for the people. So I had that little bent already. And by the time I came here, GMOs and pesticides had been introduced in a big way around the 1990s, in the mid-1990s, where most of us did not know. I was living in USA, I did not know that. But by the time the turn of the century came about and I had moved to Canada, this was already appearing on people's horizon that there is a serious problem. So I had at that time turned anti-GMO, genetically modified organism,
Right.
Not so much because I was convinced about the science. I'm an engineer. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a genetic engineer. I didn't understand much about genes. I knew this much, that human genome project was not yet over. So people didn't know about human genes itself enough. So, but on an ethical standpoint, it did not sound all right to me that corporations could own living organisms. That didn't sound all right to me. And also the fact that food was the biggest business in the entire planet. There was no business that was bigger than food. And if one could own all the food as my patented property, nobody can grow it, nobody can save the seeds, nobody can do anything with any of that without paying me a royalty, then that would literally hold the entire world's population by the throat because I own everything. So this just did not seem ethically correct to me. And that's how I instinctively turned against GMO.
Sorry, just explain,
and the science of it came later.
Explain that. So what they do is they take the genome, I guess, or the genetic predisposition of the plant, they change it, and then they patent that, and then they own that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, that's how that works, but it is more serious than that. The problem is if you have such a crop that you bought from this corporation by paying them royalty and whatever price, and then you planted it, you do not really have the right to save the seeds of the fruits that come out of the plant. That seeds, although you did not buy it from them, those seeds, because they are offsprings of the patented crop, those seeds also belong to that corporation. So even if you use that 7 generations down the line, you are supposed to pay royalty to that corporation. That means if somehow the organic ones can be made extinct, more or less, and everything is owned by them, that's it. From that point onward, forever, every item of the food, you have to pay me a royalty for every seed.
My God, I've even heard stories of farmers going out and killing themselves because basically they didn't realize what they had gotten into when they started planting these crops. And essentially these companies then came in and said, well, basically we own, like you said, we own your farm. Basically we own everything.
So this, so instinctively it didn't seem ethical to me. It didn't seem right to me. And later on I learned that they did not even invent the organism. All they did was, if an organism has 20,000 genes, it just took one gene from something else and inserted into one gene here, and then they say, I own the whole thing. This is absurd, So,
Wow.
so this is how I turned against it. But eventually, by the time, after a few years, I slowly gravitated more towards the pesticide issue rather than the GMO issue for a number of reasons. And that's, I think, is going to be the subject of this talk today.
Yes, as a matter of fact, you were introduced to me by Dr. Senef, who actually was on our show and talked about glyphosate and how it affected autism in children and how much it had increased them and stuff. So what made you go from the GMO to the pesticide thing? What was the realization that you had?
Well, when I was active here in Canada in resisting GMOs and all that, I eventually came to realize a few things. Of course, I had befriended a lot of scientists by then. A few things. That is, GMO is a very complicated subject, and you cannot put all genetically modified crops under the same umbrella because they are not all designed the same way. They do not all necessarily perform the same way, and it's scientifically it's a very complex thing. It's easy to prove ethically that it should not be allowed, patent should not be allowed, but it is difficult to prove scientifically that it is dangerous for you or not. So this is one issue that bothered me. And the second part I realized was, while there were so many different kinds of GMO crops around, by far a majority of them were designed for one specific characteristics, and that is to survive being sprayed by a particular herbicide, glyphosate. So in other words, if you can ban glyphosate, it will automatically kill the GM industry because 90% of the products will have to go out. So somehow I started looking at glyphosate a little more closely at that point. I was helped by some scientists. And then I realized that, when it comes to direct health and hazard safety issues, not ethics issues, glyphosate is a really nasty stuff. So that's when I moved out from the anti-GMO to anti-glyphosate.
Wow, that is powerful. That is powerful. So when you did come over and you said, okay, now let's start to look at it, tell us what you found. Tell us what you found. And even a little bit later, you can tell us what you found in North America versus other areas.
Yeah, okay. The first thing that I found was I was on a lonely path. It was not popular among the resistance group to talk against glyphosate. It was popular to talk against GMO. It was popular to badmouth Monsanto as an evil corporation, but it was not all right to focus on this herbicide. So this was first realization that frustrated me a bit. As I studied the issue a little more, I realized one thing. Companies like Monsanto do not necessarily break the law. They are very smart. What they do is influence countries like Canada to change the law, bend the law, or write new laws so that operations of Monsanto is now considered legal. So if I had to focus on some entity that is spoiling our food, it should be our politicians more than the corporations that are bringing this technology in. That was the first realization. And
just along that line with the politicians. So how do they do? I mean, don't the politicians live on the same planet? Don't they realize that their children, their grandchildren are being affected by these? I don't understand that.
I don't know. I've come to understand that most politicians, in fact, most ordinary people are completely ignorant about this issue because this subject is so unlike any other pesticides that you can ever come across that it's, first of all, they're ignorant, and secondly, yes, they are selling the country out on ethical grounds. They should not be allowing our local biodiversity to be finished off just because just to promote patented crops. So yes, this is all very correct, and we have a failing democracy. Democracy fails when your elected representatives favor a foreign corporation's products over the health of their own people. This is my view. But
Absolutely.
But what, question comes back to me. What am I going to do about it? I can spend my lifetime bitching about other people, or I can stand up and do something. And that do something is within the framework of the law, what is legal to do, what is allowed to do for a citizen in a democratic country. And that has been my path that has led me to where I am today.
Wow, that's very, very powerful. I mean, that's really, I think if everybody took that viewpoint, we would be out of these problems very, very quickly. So tell me, so you reached that realization, you decided to take full responsibility, and what did you determine would be the best route to do that?
Well, when I started investigating this subject, I very quickly realized one thing extremely odd about glyphosate, and probably very, very illegal, and that is that this product has been approved by individual countries, such as it has been approved by US EPA to be used in US agriculture, and it has been approved by Health Canada to be used in Canadian agriculture. And yet, the documents that this government is supposed to have seen that prompted them that glyphosate was all right to be approved and all right to be used in agriculture, these documents proving the safety of this product has not been made public. And this, I realized, is a very big thing, because it is illegal. My understanding of the law is it is completely illegal for anybody to approve the release of a product while withholding its safety documents. It does not happen for any car you buy, any pencil you buy, anything you buy. But it is the case in this issues of herbicides.
Wow, how did they do that? I guess that goes back to the politicians.
No, I mean, well, this is what, you see, when I realized that, I started petitioning officially in different ways, by Right to Information Act, by open third-party petitions, by petitions to the Parliament of Canada, officially being sponsored by an MP, to find out, to demand that the government either gives me all the safety test data it has presumably seen before it approved glyphosate, right, or it tells me officially that I do not have the right to it. So what has happened is, in this 4 years, the government has never told me that I do not have the right to it, and yet it continues to drag its feet so that I do not get to see it. And I also found out I'm the only person that has so far asked for it. And how long has the government has been dragging its feet on glyphosate? Almost 40 years.
Oh my God! Tony, you're telling me that you're the only person that's actually has this concern.
No, there has been people in USA that had this concern, and some people have taken the matter to the government in USA, and they have, what I understand from them, that the result was the same. The people have the right to see, but how they sidestep this issue is they gave those documents to one or two individuals in USA, but they tied them up in a legal disclaimer, which means that they can look at the document all they want, but they cannot photocopy it, they cannot show it, they cannot include it in any of their writings or talks, so that if they say that they have seen evidence glyphosate is unsafe, that would be only their opinion. They cannot prove it, because the proof it is illegal. They will go to jail if they come out with it. So that is how the matter works, that nobody has apparently seen them legally. According to me, I should not even have to demand it to give it to me. It should be open for anybody to see and independently verify whether those safety test results hold water or they are no better than voodoo.
Tony, do you know what the Twilight Zone is? Do you ever hear that series, The Twilight Zone?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like you're talking about an episode of The Twilight Zone, but you're not.
No,
we're talking about real life.
You're absolutely. So this is the first step that brought me to where I am, and that struggle is still ongoing. The government of Canada is still not shown those safety test data, and they have still not told me that I do not have the right. They're just dragging their feet. But at the same, while this was going on, I started to find out how much of this stuff has gotten into our food. And I started calling all the labs because I could not find any information in the government channels in the web or in the social media or anywhere else about levels of concentration of glyphosate in our food anywhere. So eventually I started calling the labs to find out if they test it, and if they have tested it, if they were willing to talk to me about it, and so on. Eventually I got hold of official listed list of labs in Canada and go through them and how to find out who tests what and so on. And I found out that about a dozen or so labs do test glyphosate, but surprisingly, they will only test glyphosate in water and soil. They will not test in any food, and they will not test in any animal body fluids such as people's urine or breast milk of mothers and so on. So I started asking them, why not? Why, if you know how to test one, why don't you test the other? Basically, the issue is like this. They have to get an accreditation for every different kind of matrices that they want to test for anything, and that applies for glyphosate as well. And that accreditation and certification costs money. They have to set up, sometimes they have to segregate and set up new sections of the lab where certain kind of samples will come, and those instruments are not used for other purposes so that there's no contamination involved. All this takes money, and then annual renewal of the certificate takes money. So therefore, they don't do these things unless there is an indication that there is a lot of market for it, that there are a lot of people who want to test it. And so far, nobody wants to test this food, and only organization that really test large quantities to justify labs providing that service is government, and the government has never asked for any food to be tested, or any urine to be tested. That's the reason they are not done it. I mean, Tony Mitra asking for one or two tests is not good enough a market indication. That is when I started rattling the government again to set up labs in Canada so that the most used herbicide on the planet and the most used in Canada can at least be tested in our food, how much of it has gotten inside it. So as usual, the government doesn't.
I'm sorry. I'm so shocked. So you're telling me, so they approve this glyphosate for foods, and they say this is it's fine, it's great, but we're not going to test it. We're not going to look at it. We have no clue, and we're not going to give you any information on it. I mean, is there any outrage by people when you tell them this? I mean, I want to throw my cup of coffee across the room. I mean, what kind of reaction when you tell people this do you get?
Well, the thing is, people did not know. I'm the first person, as far as I know, who raised this issue. People didn't know. They assumed that everything is hunky-dory and whatever is in the food is still safe, and that we have labs, and they are trusting people. They trust government. This is what government are supposed to do. Take care of these issues for the people. They did not know that we are being left high and dry. So once I came to know about it, and I wrote a lot of angry letters to the government. To my good luck, it came to the attention of a particular member of parliament who was also concerned about this, and who has been involved with this subject for some years. So he checked independent of me by asking his office staff to contact all the labs in Canada to find out, is it true that what Tony Mitra is saying, there's no lab that will test food. And they did that for 1 month, and they told that member of parliament that yes, he was apparently true. Then nobody. So I did not know this was going on, but his office staff called me up eventually one day and said that, we have been hunting high and low to find a lab that will test food, and you're right.
Wow.
Nobody will test food, so now the member of parliament wants to talk to you. So that's why we are calling you to set up a meeting. So eventually what happened is this gentleman asked me to send a copy, reprint that letter I had given to the ministry, sign it and give it to him so that he can enclose a cover letter on top of it and then walk it across the floor of the parliament and give it to the health minister in hand in presence of others to demand that the minister answers my question why Canada does not have a lab to test this. So what happened is the government responded finally, but it was a wishy-washy. They didn't say they will set up labs. They didn't say they will not set up. They just thank you for your concern and that kind of thing. So I was more mad seeing that non-committal letter than no response. So anyway, what happened is within a year, within a few months actually, labs started turning around. They started getting these hints from the government that they want to test food for glyphosate. And once they got the hint, they started scrambling to get themselves accredited, those labs that were interested in that business. And very soon, within a year, we had quite a few labs that would test different kinds of food and plant matter for glyphosate. You know, some will test processed food, some will test live plants, some will test seeds and fruits and blah, blah. And around that time, the World Health Organization also declared classified glyphosate as a probable carcinogen. I think you know about that. This happened in 2015. So the government was already started testing food. I came to know unofficially from some sources inside the labs. The government never made a public announcement of it. There was nowhere in the media, social media, official media, newspapers, TV, nowhere that labs are now coming up, that there were no labs before, that government is testing the food. It was all kept under the carpet, except that I knew about it completely. And I was somewhat involved in the matter. So I started badgering the government on one more front. Give me the data of what you're finding.
Yep.
It took me 18 months of struggle. And to my good luck and quite surprise as well, I suddenly got a motherload of 8,000 records on my lap.
How many?
That was in December last year.
How many, Tony?
Nearly 8,000, 7,864 or 68.
So you went from 0 to 8,000 records. What did they show? What did they show, sir?
Well, it took me a long time to convert the data, which were in printed form, and it had to be, you had to scan and get character recognition software, then converted into gigantic spreadsheets so that some comparisons could be made, multiple spreadsheets. So once...
Now, Tony, you're doing this on your own dime. I mean, you're paying for this yourself. This sounds like
Of course. Completely myself. I have not a single person helping me. And of course, I'm doing it free. Nobody's paying me to do that. I'm doing it for paying back my duty to the society. We take a lot from the society to grow up, and everyone has a duty to pay it back in some way.
God bless you. Absolutely.
So initially, I was getting surprised with this and that without knowing the full picture. For instance, initially I was quite frustrated that there was nothing on wheat, and I expected wheat to be bad because it was desiccated with glyphosate, but there were no records coming up. So I thought they purposefully did not test wheat. But no, that was not the way. They just government has a proper way of doing things. So they start with one, they take hundreds and hundreds of samples, then they go on to the next one, take hundreds, like that. So eventually wheat started coming up. Okay. And also wheat products started coming up. And that is when I realized...
Tony, one thing. You said desiccated. What does that mean? You said wheat is desiccated with glyphosate.
Yeah, correct. This is important for people to know that glyphosate is used... as approved by the governments as a weed killer to be used on special kind of GM crops that will survive being sprayed by glyphosate, which means when those genetically modified crops are growing on the ground, you can spray the ground with this herbicide. Earlier, if it was not genetically engineered, everything will die, including your own crop. But now, if you have that genetically engineered magic crop, then everything else will die, but your crop will continue to grow. So this was the practice for which the government has approved of glyphosate, although they are still not disclosing the safety data. This is one side. Now, apart from all those genetically engineered crops, there are also a whole lot of crops that are not genetically engineered. They are conventional type. Wheat is one of them, where if you apply glyphosate, it will die. Just like wheat, it also will die. So, of course, you cannot apply it when it is growing, but unfortunately, it has now become a widespread practice to apply it just before harvesting, forcing it to die quickly, become dry so that the harvesting machine can get a 1%, 2% more efficiency rather than when the plant is still juicy and soft and doesn't pull off so easily. And another thing is the wheats, all the kernels of the wheats or any other crop doesn't all mature at the same time. Some mature earlier and some mature 2-3 weeks later, some mature even later, so on. So as a result, whenever you're harvesting, there is always small quantity of these kernels who are not yet fully grown, and therefore and they're not hardened, and they're still soft and juicy and not the right type, and therefore you lose them when you're in the harvesting machine. But if you apply a poison on it, then what happens is the plant kind of goes into an emergency mode, you can say. It kicks into certain, triggers certain steps when it's facing death. And one of the steps is this partially grown kernels and seeds. They are forcefully matured, even if they are half the size or 3/4 the size, they are still forcefully matured. It's something like, you can say, if a pregnant mother is suddenly about to die for whatever reason, it prematurely delivers a baby that is not fully grown but still has a chance to survive rather than stay inside and die.
Sure.
So something like that happens to the grains, and that is supposed to improve the harvesting efficiency by 1 or 2%. And the other reason is in colder countries like Canada and northern parts of USA, if suddenly frost comes in a little earlier than expected, it can kill the crops, and they rot and they spoil, and you cannot sell them anymore. So sometimes they want to fix the date of the harvesting ahead of uncertainty period when frost might suddenly come in. So that's one more reason, because of wheat is still wanting to grow. There's one more reason to force it to die and become soft and like straw. I mean, dry and straw, and also improve your harvesting. For these reasons, they use glyphosate on non-GMO crops, wheat being one example, not the only one. So I knew, so when you apply it just before harvesting on a crop that is conventional like wheat, it is expected to be in the seed. There's common sense. You're not applying it on the ground before you planted the seeds. You are applying it 3 days before harvesting when the seeds are already ready, So
you're poisoning the food.
Correct. So I expected it to be there, but it's better. Everything is as good as what results you find. So once I started finding glyphosate in wheat, I went crazy. So I started telling everybody that there is evidence that everything we suspected is correct because the results are showing so. But eventually, when I started compiling all the data and putting them together, and started looking at it from afar, and started comparing not just wheat, but within wheat, and also wheat from here as against wheat from there, certain alarming details started coming up. And that is when I realized a couple of things. Within wheat, if you have time, I can say very briefly that wheat bran seems to be way more toxic than the wheat flour. And now it makes sense, because bran may have more fibers, but it is the outer layer of the seed, and that is where it is designed to absorb as much toxin as possible, preventing it to go further into the germ and into the herd the next generation. So it absorbs more. But now people like bran because it has got more fiber, and now you're getting poisoned 10 times more by using. So these realizations only came to me when I started seeing it. But when I started checking around, I found more alarming issues, and that is that comparing same food from different parts of the world, North America turned out to be the nastiest place when it comes to toxicity in food. And I use the word toxic and poisonous to describe foods laced with glyphosate in disregard of scientific community, especially mainstream scientific community, who likes to control the meaning of the word poison and toxic, and they keep on harping that glyphosate is not toxic. It is not acute toxic. You cannot call it toxic. You can drink it and nothing happens. So it's a trick of the argument of what is considered toxic and what is not considered toxic. But I believe that I deny the right of owning the meaning of the word toxic and poisonous to this group of people. The meaning of the word depends on what most people speaking that language consider the meaning to be. And to me, glyphosate is acutely toxic. That means it will more or less instantly kill a whole large number of microorganisms, not humans, but microorganisms without whom we cannot survive. So they are beneficial and essential microorganisms, and glyphosate is acutely toxic to them, and it is chronically toxic. That means it will slow poison almost every other living creatures of value, including human beings. That is my definition. So they can keep on harping that it is not toxic. I will keep on insisting it is toxic, and I will use the word toxic and poisonous as I see it.
Tony, let me ask you a question. I remember distinctly there was a video of a gentleman that was like a Monsanto advocate who said that Roundup was safe enough to drink. I think his name was Moore or something like that. And then the guy in the video that was filming it said, well, actually, we have a glass of it right here because we thought you might say that. We'd like you to drink it. And you can actually pull up the YouTube video. It's something like Monsanto's advocate says Roundup is safe enough to drink but won't drink it. And he just refuses to drink it. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I've seen that. Patrick Moore, that was, yeah, and he ran away from it. He's become a mouthpiece of this. But you see, it's in a way correct and not correct. If you drink it, you will not die as if, like you got shot with a bullet, and or that you drank arsenic or cyanide. But you will certainly be extremely sick very soon if your gut bacteria all dies because of that concentrated glyphosate you're drinking. Sure. And very soon your gut lining will be gone. You will be, you'll have acute pain every time you eat anything because it's touching your intestinal wall directly. It's not supposed to touch. Your intestine gets hold and leaky and food start leaking. I mean, it's a horrible way of, so yes, it is not acutely toxic, but it is chronically toxic, and it is playing with words, and I deny the right of this kind of people, Patrick Moore and party, to own the meaning of the word toxic.
Wow. I mean, this is Tony, just listening to this and hearing this. I mean, what do we do? Or what do we eat? What is safe at this point? I mean, it sounds like
I found out, Dan, unfortunately, and this pains me makes me feel like crying. North Americans are into a kind of a nightmare is seen where finding good food has become very difficult, and it is going to become increasingly more difficult as time passes on. Of course, you can buy organic, but you can't tell the entire population to eat only organic because there's not so much organic around, and right. Also most people cannot even afford it. And it is the organic part is only geared to be a small portion of your entire diet. So that's not a practical solution, and it's also not, doesn't seem right to tell people that what is not organic, conventional food, is not even food. It has become a good example of what food should not be like. Of course, it's not everything. It's only mainly seed-based foods that are in this category. It's not the case with some vegetables and leafy vegetables and so on, because those will immediately die with glyphosate, and of course you cannot buy them in the store anymore. So those ones may be having something else, but they're not having glyphosate. So there are some areas where you can still get good food, glyphosate-free food, reasonably well. But then when it comes to your main seed-based foods, I'm saying that I'll leave the meat and milk and all aside for the time being, it's becoming increasingly difficult because wheat is contaminated, and like 70-80% of it is contaminated. That means 10-20% of it may be still good, but how can you pick which one is good, which one is not good? Because these tests show how bad it is, but it does not give individual brand names. It doesn't help you pick out the good ones and leave the. So this is the problem. Some of these foods are 95% contaminated. I mean, in North America, and if you check Mexico next door, most of their foods, which is not seed-based, which is mostly vegetables, almost zero glyphosate. You take foods from, for instance, Thailand or France or so many other countries, they're almost zero glyphosate. So they're also making food. We don't import hell of a lot of them, but whatever we import, there seem to be remarkable difference. And that is how it came to me that North America is the most produces the most toxic food, and within North America, Canada produces more toxic food than USA. So essentially, Canada is the champion poisonous food producer in the world, and western part of Canada is the epicenter because that is where the prairies are. That is where the most of the large-scale agricultural industry is located.
Oh my God, Tony! I mean, it's just going back to this concept of eating Mexico from food from Mexico. Is that something you would recommend? I don't know. Would you say that the majority of the foods are not sprayed, so that would be a good country to get your food from as best as possible?
Yeah. What I found, first of all, is the vegetables anywhere is better than seed-based foods, and out of them, the nearby countries wise. Mexico is very much better than both USA and Canada, but only those things that we do import from Mexico. There is no wheat from Mexico. There is no barley from Mexico. There is no oat from Mexico. So if you want this kind of seed-based cereals, you're out of luck because Mexico doesn't. If they produce it, at least we are not bringing them in. I think our countries protect our wheat industry or other the oat and rye and so on by purposefully not bringing this crops from anywhere else. So you have a very poor choice of eating this toxic food or wheat or rye, or not eating those at all. You can get wheat products from elsewhere, such as a pasta coming from Europe or something that is made out of wheat, but you can't get just wheat. So what do you do? So these are the issues. You can take Mexican food. In fact, I have instinctively started buying Mexican cauliflowers and beans and so on when I see that, because I know that they don't have this habit of wholesale application of some nasty pesticides on them. They're generally clean, so I do that. But among the main seeds, what I find is corn and soy, which are genetically modified Roundup ready, they have far less glyphosate, produced in North America. They have far less glyphosate than rye, oat, wheat, chickpeas, garbanzo. They have enormously more. The level of glyphosate in these crops as against, let's say, corn, is not just 10-20%. It's like 10 times, 20 times, 30 times more.
Oh, wow.
So if you are desperate, if you are absolutely desperate and you're poor, you cannot afford to get French food or, all kinds of, and you need to have some main grains, and you like corn, I would say, it pains me to say that, but I would say that as far as glyphosate alone is concerned, I don't know about other things, corn is a lot safer than chickpeas or lentils or oat or rye or these are all non-GMO, and they are all poisonous like hell.
Oh my God! What about, Tony? What about, people talk about gluten-free foods? What about
This is another surprising realization from me, and I put up a chart on that, and it's in the book I've written. Gluten-free food. Let us put some figures. If you consider just gluten-free food around the world, and make two categories: gluten-free food produced in North America, and by North America I mean without Mexico. Mexico is in a different league altogether, and so leave that aside. I mean Canada and USA. Gluten-free food produced in North America as against gluten-free food produced in the rest of the world. And then you take an average figure of glyphosate in these two groups. The figures are like this. For the rest of the world, it is 11 parts per billion, 1. And for North America, it is 231. Now you try to compare 11 with 231, and you make up your own mind.
Wow.
Now, if you consider how gluten intolerance came about, I know these scientists, and I have come to realize that gluten-free might have a lot to do with a damaged gut bacteria to start with, gluten was always part of food and it was always 10,000 years. People had no issue. Why suddenly gluten intolerance is coming up and suddenly gluten, you cannot eat gluten and everybody is producing gluten-free? Why? Well, one of the issues that I understand from the scientists is that if you have damaged gut bacteria, which might have happened because of glyphosate to start with, because your gut bacteria is dying out of the from contact with this stuff, that is when your gluten cannot be processed anymore because we do not process it. Those gut bacteria do it for us, and those parts are damaged now. So now I become gluten intolerant. Some places my intestine might be exposed to direct food, which is not supposed to be exposed. And then if gluten is there, it hurts me, pains me, all kinds of things. So I'm now forced to eat gluten-free food. However, if the same glyphosate is so much more in that gluten-free food that I'm eating, am I moving towards curing myself or moving towards making myself more sick? This is a stark comment. I personally don't have gluten intolerance. I eat organic as far as possible. I try to grow my own. So I don't have an issue, and I am not averse to eating gluten at all. I don't consider it to be bad. But I realize that a lot of people in North America are forced to eat gluten-free food because they are gluten intolerant, and now they have a really nasty choice that gluten-free food is so much worse than organic food.
Tony, what an interview. My God. Sir, how would people learn more about your book? How would they get more in touch with you if they want more information on it? This is quite
the book has just been published on Amazon, and there is not a single link for it because Amazon has one link for each country. And if you are living in country A, you can only buy from that Amazon and not another's. But for people in United States, it's Amazon.com. And the name of the book is Poison Foods of North America.
Poison Foods of North America. Wow.
So if you type it, it'll immediately come up. I think it's $7 something for the Kindle. It's an ebook. $7.40 or something like that for that version, and you don't have to have the Kindle device. It shows up on your iPad or your iPhone or your computer, and if you have a strange operating system or something, the Kindle Amazon sells a free it gives a free app that will run on your computer or your devices without having to buy the Kindle device, and you can run it. I found it best to read on my computer rather than my devices, mainly because this is not a story book with only words, which is all right to show in different devices, and you turn it and the text realign itself. This book has got a lot of tables of comparisons of actual values of glyphosate in this kind of food or that kind. So those tables do not behave well when you turn it into small,
Right.
So that is one reason it is best on the computer. It looks really nice. It's colored tables and all that. And it's not something that you can, how to say, this is not a magic book that in 5 minutes will make you wise. This is a guidebook on picking and choosing through a minefield of glyphosate in our food web. This has become really, really difficult. So you have to spend time and get acclimatized, realize certain foods are more dangerous than certain other foods. And within those dangerous foods, here are the bits and pieces that are still okay.
Tony Mitra, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, sir. It was very enlightening, very scary. And I'm sure a lot of people will download and get the book and learn a great deal. How would they get in touch with you? Any websites or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll give you my website and my email. My website is www.tonu, that's Tango Oscar November Uniform.org.
Okay.
And my email is just my name with a dot in the middle. That's tony.mitra, tony.mitra @gmail.com.
Tony Mitra, thank you, sir, again for being on the show, and thanks for all the hard work.
One more suggestion to any listener: if they have a specific query about this or that kind of food that is not covered in the book somehow, I'm willing to run that test through the data and either include it in the book or send it back by email the result of that query to the person. I'm willing to do that.
Wow, very, very amazing. Tony, you're amazing. Thank you, sir, for being on the show. Greatly, greatly appreciated.
Thank you and take care.
This episode is sponsored by New Jersey Foot and Ankle Center in Orodo, New Jersey. Remember, when you have a foot problem, you've got a foot doctor in the family. Weekend and evening appointments are available. Call us at 201-261-9445. Once again, that's 201-261-9445. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes over at drdanspeaks.com. If you're loving the show, head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time. Voiceovers for this episode were provided by Randy Ramos Jr. To see and hear more of his work, visit randyramosjr.com.